Hello friends, and welcome back to our channel. Do you want to know whether or not you should move to Layton? Is it a good place to live, work, and play? Even if it is it the right place for you?
If you've considered moving to Layton, Utah, and you want to know more about living here, then stay tuned because we're going to give you the 10 facts that you need to know before making your move over here to Layton, Utah.
If this is your first time to this channel and you want to know everything about living, eating, sleeping, working, and playing in northern Utah, then subscribe below and tap the bell for notifications so you can be the first to know about the current market here in northern Utah.
We are Sloane and Peterson with the Peterson Group. We've been in the real estate business for 10 years, and every day we help people just like you looking to buy and sell in northern Utah, and we absolutely love it. Whether you're moving in 9 days or 90 days, give us a call, shoot us a text, or send us an email. All the information is in the description below, so we can help you make that smooth move over here to northern Utah. Let's go ahead and get into it.
Okay, so fact number one, if you're thinking of making the move here to Layton, Utah, is the jets. The jets, the jets, the jets. We've talked about them before, and we've referenced them in several videos, including this one. But Layton is loud. It doesn't matter if you move to the east side, the west side, the north side, the south side. The entirety of Layton is loud. Now, the noise isn't nonstop, but the jets do fly pretty much every day, at least for a few hours, so you will hear them. If you have moved to working from home, like so many people have because of the pandemic, then have that in mind if you are making phone calls or need a more quiet environment. And I'm very passionate about it, but it's because I lived in Layton for so many years, and those jets are loud.
Absolutely, and they're a beautiful sight. I won't lie. I mean, you're getting a free air show right in your backyard, but it does make working from home, or even if you're watching your favorite TV show and those jets, they're very loud, right? Even you'll shake your windows and all that. Depending on how new or old your house is, you might hear it more intensely, but there's nothing more annoying than when you're on the phone going, hold on, we gotta wait for the jets. And anyone that lives in Layton, it's just a daily occurrence where you're having to wait to finish your conversation because of how loud it is. All right, so that brings us to the number 2 fact, which is, as in most Utah cities, religion. So in Layton, a whopping 74.7% do identify their religion as Mormon. Layton is probably one of the cities that is the highest in that regard, which might be a little bit surprising because of the military base. Just something to consider if that is important to you as far as choosing which city you would like to live in.
Yeah, so a funny story about that is we actually moved from Denver, Colorado, and my mom had no idea what Mormonism or LDS was. And I think a lot of people really don't know a lot about it if you're moving from out of state. But she truly, when my dad told us we were moving to Utah, because he was in the military, he came to Hill Air Force Base, and she was like, are we going to have electricity? Like, are we going to be in, like, buggies? Are we going to, like, in her mind, she thought LDS and Amish were the same thing. And she was so just like, I'm not prepared to move to somewhere like that. My dad was like, what are you talking about? Like, that's not what Mormons are.
Yeah, it's hilarious. And she was driving around the city just being like, I've been looking for these Mormons, and I haven't seen any anywhere. It's weird. I'm not sure where they're at. And I just keep seeing these churches, though, that say Latter-day Saints, and so I'm not sure where the Mormons are, though. And so Kim's dad had to tell her, well, no, the Latter-day Saints is the same thing, yeah. And Mormons don't look any different than anyone else, so you would probably not notice when you've seen one. So yeah. It's kind of hilarious that we thought, if you're not from Utah, maybe you kind of think the same thing. I mean, every time I'm out of state and I say that I'm from Utah, I always at least get one time the polygamous question, right? Like, how many wives do you have out there, right? And it's just not, Utah is not like that. Yeah, we do have silly little laws and things that a dominant religion will bring into it, which we'll discuss, more in detail in another video. But for the most part, it's not really all that different. So.
Yeah, and I think that's the same as any, like you said, city that has a dominant religion. That's, of course, just going to play a factor in what that city looks like. And that's not always a negative. I mean, Utah, because of its high religious population, is one of the safest, states in the entire country. And so there are a lot of positives because of that as well.
Yes, I totally agree. Yep.
So in terms of diversity, Layton is 85.7% white. So it is one of the cities that has a little less diversity than, say, Ogden or Salt Lake. So again, that's just something to consider if that's important to you one way or the other.
Okay, so this one that kind of goes hand in hand with number two, and we really haven't talked about yet, but it can definitely be an issue if it's something that you're not used to, and that's stores being closed on Sundays. If you're moving from an area where this isn't the case, seeing so many stores closed on Sunday can be a serious culture shock. You'll need to learn new habits like getting all of your grocery shopping and getting all your errands done on weekdays or on Saturdays. And then, of course, making sure that your brunch dates happen on Saturdays. I've also noticed that this has actually gotten much worse since COVID happened, so just keep that in mind. And just one thing to keep in mind also is that you can find stores that are open on Sundays. This might be a little further away from your house. The bigger Walmarts and things like that will be open on Sundays, so there are options. It's just not going to be like right in your neighborhood grocery stores and things like that.
That's what I was going to say. That's a great point. There are still grocery shops open on Sundays, but they are your bigger chains. So like our local grocery store is closed on Sundays, and most local shops are. But the good thing about living in Layton is they do have a lot of chains and bigger shops, so that's not as big of an issue somewhere like Layton.
And especially like these days, right? Like when I was younger, Utah was shut down. So as it's gotten bigger and we got more chain stores in Utah, you definitely do have options, but it will be limited. And like bars and things like that, can you even drink on? I think maybe you can now. When I was younger, you couldn't even go to the bar on a Sunday, but I think you can nowadays.
Yeah, so that's actually a great question. Kind of brings us into number 5, which is the alcohol laws. Now, this isn't just for Layton, but for all of Utah. And we did talk about this in our 10 Facts About Ogden video, but I do think it's worth reiterating. I think obviously in more urban areas, you will find more bars. So it's good to know the alcohol laws as they're very different from any other state I've ever been to. And Layton is actually more of a suburb. So it's, there's not as many bars, but obviously there are still many restaurants that serve alcohol.
Yeah, that's a good point. And so a couple things there is the legal limit here is under 0.05, which is actually really low. And most people, you could drink like 1 or 2 beers and be at that level. So just make sure that if you like to have a drink with dinner, that you are getting a designated driver, whether that's just your significant other or a friend or even just an Uber. Another thing is that the liquor stores are all state owned and you cannot buy wine or hard alcohol in grocery stores. So I was actually born and raised in Utah, and that was never anything different because I didn't know anything different. But when I met Kim and as I started traveling outside of Utah as I got older, I started realizing that Utah is actually very unique in that regard. Like you can't even like not even wine, like I said, right? You can't pick up wine anywhere other than a liquor store. And then High Point beer, things like that, that's stuff that you would get at a liquor store as well. And that's just something to note as well, is in grocery stores, you are only getting lower point beer. I think it's like 3.2% in alcohol content. And your average beer in most of the country is about 5%. So it is quite a bit lower.
It is a running joke, like that Utah beer is basically water with like a beer with a beer flavor.
Yeah, so we're all lightweights out here in Utah. We go to a real estate and have a beer and we're like, what is this?
We're a cheap date, okay? We're a cheap date.
The last thing to note is there is a distinct difference on bars and restaurants in Utah. And if you're a designated restaurant, a patron does have to order food to even order an alcoholic drink. So only one drink is allowed per person at a time, and you have to actually finish that drink before they can even bring you another one. It's something to keep in mind if you're moving to Layton or Utah in general.
Yeah, and so that is something interesting. I think a lot of people don't really realize the big differences, especially like Sloane said, if you grew up in Utah, this is pretty normal. But one thing that I thought was interesting is if you cannot order a pitcher to yourself. So I remember one time I tried to order a pitcher of beer to myself, and I was with a bunch of friends, but nobody else really wanted a drink. And just a pitcher was so much cheaper. I was in college, and so it's like, save the money, get a pitcher. But they actually don't let you unless 2 or more people are drinking. So it is quite different, but it's worth it to know the laws, obviously, because you don't want to get in trouble because you didn't understand, the laws of alcohol in Utah.
Or just setting your expectations too, right? Like if you're going and the getting mad at the waiter or waitress for not being able to bring you 2 drinks at a time, not really their fault. So it's a Utah law. So just knowing that and saying that those expectations will help you have a better experience at the bar or restaurant as well.
For sure. Okay, so number 6 is latent traffic. We have talked about this a lot, and a lot of people from bigger cities think they will move to Utah and that we won't have the same amount of traffic, but that's just not true. Layton has a ton of traffic from the military base, but also just its large commercial presence. Layton has structured all kinds of U-turns and things to help with the traffic issues, but in all honesty, I personally think it just creates more confusion. So if maybe your commuting to work is short, or you work near where you live, it isn't so bad, but just something to keep in mind about Layton, especially if you really hate traffic.
Yeah, speaking of traffic, we just have to talk a little bit more about those U-turns. So it's the weirdest thing ever. Like, I've never seen anything built like this. And so they have a lot of chain restaurants, right, in Layton, like Kim was saying, and just a lot of chain everything, right? Like, as far as, grocery stores or like things like Office Depot or
Shopping,
Staples, just
yeah.
all that stuff, right? And it kind of all meets in the same area. And so, unfortunately, as it's gotten bigger, it was started backing up the freeways, things like that. And so, what they decided to do was they don't allow left-hand turns in certain areas. So you have to drive all the way, like probably 3 or 4 blocks down the road, and then do a U-turn to come back, going either east or west. And so it made the traffic for sure better coming off the freeway, which I think was their main objective, to make it so it wasn't backing that up. However, you're just kind of diverting traffic down the road a little further, and it does make the commute kind of annoying, because if you need to go west, you have to go east for a few blocks to go west, or vice versa. So it is kind of annoying.
And I just want to point out that's only in Layton. That was Layton City's solution to the traffic problem. So that's not in any other city. It's really specific to Layton.
Yeah, yep. And that was one of the things that just drove me crazy. Like, the jets and the U-turns drove me nuts. All right, so number 7, which actually goes along with number 6, is road construction. So Utah does have an intense freeze and thaw cycle that really does wreak havoc on the roads and sidewalks. So Layton is obviously not an exception to this situation, and potholes big enough to break an axle can pop up overnight. So I used to have
Literally.
a car that was like a lowered car, right, as I was younger, and it was just a nightmare to drive, because you hit one of those potholes and one of your tires can be gone, or you can like break an axle or like a bearing or something. So it definitely does get kind of crazy out there. They do fix them usually relatively quickly on the main roads,
Yeah.
but it obviously does cause construction.
I used to have a little Toyota Yaris that had little like 10-inch tires, which are super small. That's not like a standard size. And I would get a flat tire from a pothole like once a month. It was so annoying.
Yeah, that's serious. Those things will eat you. It'll swallow your car whole. Yeah, like I said, the city does do a pretty good job trying to repair those pretty quickly, but there is a lot to do, right? So that's not going to be always a top priority. So if Layton isn't under construction, then you can probably count that neighboring cities of Farmington or Clearfield or any other city will probably be under construction, and so you're not going to avoid it no matter where you're at.
Yeah, I mean, in Utah, there's construction on the freeways. There's construction in every city. And what's the joke that people say?
So we say that our state mascot should not be the beehive. It should actually be a construction cone, because that's all you see everywhere is these big orange construction cones. And it's been like that my whole life, really. I think that I remember construction as long as I can remember. And not just like everyone experiences that, right? But it's just massive construction. Our infrastructure needs to grow, because Utah is growing at a pretty quick way.
All right, and so that brings us to number 8, which is rent. If you think you'll save money by renting until you can afford to buy, think again, at least in Layton. Rent is super limited, and what apartments there are tend to be more expensive than the national average. Again, we talked about this a little bit in Layton's cost of living video, but it's because most of the apartment complexes are newer and they're always full because of the Hill Air Force Base. And so rents are always going to be a little bit more high in areas where the demand is higher. In a lot of ways, if you can afford to buy, at least in Layton, that can be more affordable than renting, depending on your circumstances, especially because the home prices are coming down to a more affordable average.
Another thing to know about moving to Layton is typically wages are less than the same job in another state. We did do a video on the highest paying jobs in Layton. If you want to check it out, we'll put it just right there, and you can look at that video. But statistically speaking, we are a little bit lower than the national average. So if you are moving from another state and are transferring into the same job, then it might pay you slightly less or equal to where you are moving from. However, this is usually offset by our cost of living, which tends to be slightly lower than the national average according to bestplaces.net. People are often surprised, though, when we do talk about our wages in comparison to other cities and how much lower they can be for the same type of job.
And number 10 is Layton doesn't have a lot of environmental threats, and that's nice. Tornadoes rarely form and touch down. Even less frequently, landslides don't hit the Layton area as often as neighboring cities, and most of the city is above the flood line. However, the windstorms can get pretty bad.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I don't remember the wind being like this when I was a kid, and some people tell me it's always been this way, but I really don't remember all these windstorms. I mean, I remember just a few years ago they were so bad that they were blowing diesels over on the road. So it's gotten insane, and I swear these days we have probably a windstorm at least once a week that gets about like 60 miles an hour or so.
Yeah.
And it does blow your decorations. Like, if you want to decorate stuff on your house, it can blow those around, which gets annoying.
Well, and there are definitely certain pockets and cities, and Layton is one of those, because I wouldn't say every city has these major windstorms, but Layton definitely did. I know when my parents lived there, they would always be like missing siding, missing shingles, so definitely can cause some havoc. Make sure all your shingles are in place. Do anything you need to do to kind of keep that from wreaking, the worst havoc that it can, because it does get pretty bad.
All right, guys, that wraps up the facts to know if you're looking to move to Layton, Utah. We hope you found this video helpful, and if you did, please leave us a comment below. We love to hear from you guys, and picking where you'll call home is an important decision, and we would love to help you make that smooth transition to cities like Layton, Utah, and the surrounding areas.
If you're looking to purchase in the northern Utah area, we would love to help you out. Give us a call, shoot us a text, or send us an email. And until next time, we're keeping it real. The state.